Welcome to the Unriveted podcast, where we talk about technology, digital transformation, artificial intelligence, and people. This episode is in part brought to you by the training site called HyperSkill, where you can learn to code and learn all kinds of new technologies for what, John? Free. So with that, John.
Oh. I thought you were going to say to be all you can be as a human being, but that's good too.
And
Good.
today, John, we are going to be all we can be as human beings.
Perfect. Just today, we won't make it a full-time job.
So begs the question, John, what are we going to talk about today?
All right, Martin, we are going to talk about one of our favorite topics, generative AI, and specifically, we're going to talk about large language models, and even more specifically, some of the challenges of large language models, and in particular, hallucinations. Yes, hallucinate. Like that shirt, exactly, like your shirt. You are wearing a physical hallucination, but I like it. It gets my seal of approval. So,
John, you're breaking my heart. You don't think this shirt fits the podcast?
I think it's, before I even knew we were talking about hallucinations, and then you popped up wearing that, I think it was serendipity. So well chosen. Me, all plain, all business today.
Well, interesting that we're going to talk about hallucinations. I have a few quotes. I may call them out by name of person, actual person, or just their title, what company, so I don't get in big legal trouble with anybody. But there's a co-founder of DeepMinds, and he's also a director at that big googly-like company. And John, I quote this per how they said it. One of the biggest challenges with AI is that it can hallucinate.
Right. Yeah, I've been trying to figure out exactly, and I'm sure there's information out there for what causes hallucination. So a hallucination, for basically those of you that do not know, a hallucination is when a large language model makes stuff up to answer your query, your prompt, your question. And because it does such a good job of delivering in natural language a response, that sometimes people will just be like, oh yeah, well, ChatGPT or GPT-4 told me blah, 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 blah. And, it ends up not being right, but then they don't go and follow it up. So it's an issue. It's definitely something that LLMs still have. And I've heard of some ways that maybe you can circumvent hallucinations. But if anything, you know what? Maybe it's a whole new industry of people's jobs in the future will be professional hallucinators. I don't know.
Anti-hallucinatories. So
anti-hallucinatories, yes.
Yeah, we'll put that one in print. That word was trademarked here.
Yep.
So, there's a famous AI researcher, and he says AI hallucinations are a symptom of a deeper problem, John, which is at the root of a lot of AI systems, and they're not good enough at understanding the world. Well, John, let me help you out here a little bit. I think there's things that happen in the world today that you just can't make it up. And so sometimes it's difficult to know a real hallucination or a fabricated hallucination. And how do you justify it? John, help me out.
Yeah, for me, it's when you think about ChatGPT, we'll just use that as a reference. Obviously, there's many other language models out there now floating around, but ChatGPT kind of was the one that brought everyone's attention to it. And it was trained on a corpus of, the internet, essentially data from the internet. trillions, I believe, of data points of text. So, if it's creating a hallucination and we think about the mechanism that drives the large language model, the attention mechanism in the transformer model, we'll skip over that for the mathematics part. But let's just say this is what makes large language models so powerful, is this mechanism for understanding context in both directions of reading up, a sentence in a given language. So it makes me wonder, Martin, if these LLMs are hallucinating and they're trained off of information that they found on the internet, does that mean that there is some place on the internet where, where a incorrect answer to someone's question pre-existed long before ChatGPT came along, and that during the training process it found that and committed it to its memory, so to speak, and then regurgitated that back up and said, oh yeah, the first person on the moon was President George W. Bush or something like that. So does that mean it's out there somewhere on the internet with someone that created that, or is there some issue in the the model that's doing that?
Yeah, John, I mean, the visuals that come to mind from what you just said and me actually overlaying it when I do my editorial here is going to be hilarious. So there's
I can imagine.
Yeah. There's fiction, right? And there's truth, and truth is double air quoted for whose truth? Because we can ask three people how they saw an incident and get three completely different stories in their mind. They are all in the belief system of the truth. And if all three of them publish how they saw the incident, and then you go to train on it, where is that truth? Is it an amalgam of the three truths? How do you know what the truth is? So we could get into that as a topic on its own, but in the world of generative AI, how you detect a true untruth or hallucination is, I think, suspect, because if it's trained on data that is potentially deemed not truthful, but no one's marked it as not truthful, and the fact finders of the world haven't, redacted the information so it could be retrained.
Right.
How do you fix this? How do you detect it, John?
Wow. I mean, that's a hard question or a hard question to answer. I could come up with something. I could fake an answer, and I think that would be fitting. But
I think you could hallucinate one.
I could hallucinate. Let me go to my garden and grab my magic mushrooms first, which I do not condone, and you can edit that out. But yeah, I don't know. I mean, you think about the internet. Obviously, there's no one putting any guardrails on what people can put on the internet. Now, anyone can just spin up a website in 5 minutes and have it, searchable by Google in 10 minutes. So, all someone would have to do is create a website specifically for the purpose of trying to poison an LLM, and it would probably take a lot more than a single website. But you get the point. You can't stop people from putting untruthful things on the internet. So I don't know. I'm not sure if there's a way to do that unless you don't use the internet as your training data source. If you were able to use like a digital library, maybe you'd have better results, but then you would miss out on other things that are, more attuned to, people's feelings and emotions that you might not capture in a book. So I don't know. It's a good question.
Yeah. So how you reduce and how you measure hallucinations is also suspect based on what is truth. And several celebrities go online and they tout all these worries of the problems with AI. And you've heard of Will Smith, the Fresh Prince.
Yeah, rings a bell.
Yeah. So he's concerned about the potential of AI to become so intelligent that it surpasses human intelligence. Go figure.
Well, it's probably already surpassed a lot of people's intelligence, unfortunately.
Well, probably mine, because I have a very small mind.
Oh, we know that's not true. That's not true. But they do exist out there. They do exist. But I'm looking up an article here. It's on archive.org. For those of you that have not heard of it, the Cornell University preprint website for white papers. And an article that I was looking up for this called "How Language Model Hallucinations Can Snowball," saying that one can lead to another, especially if you're using like chain of thought. Well, chain of thought sometimes can work positively, sometimes negatively, but I'm going to call out a little quote here in the abstract that says, crucially, we find that ChatGPT and GPT-4 can identify 67% and 87% of their own mistakes, respectively. So we refer to this phenomena as hallucination snowballing, when a language model overcommits to early mistakes, leading to more mistakes than it otherwise would not make.
Oh, John,
Interesting
I
concept.
I call I call I call that. How do they get the 67 and 87%? I mean, where do they pull out these numbers?
Well, I haven't looked at the white paper, so I'm sure it's in there and they can justify it. But oh well, wait, no, wait. Let me take that back. Let me go. Let me read further back in the abstract. The sentence before the one I started, it says, we construct 3 question answering data sets where ChatGPT and GPT-4 often state an incorrect answer and offer an explanation with at least one incorrect claim. And then it goes on to say, crucially, we find that GPT and GPT-4 can identify 67% own mistakes. So there is a methodology behind it. I apologize for not saying that.
Thank you for clarifying. I sit educated. Thank you so much.
Yes, yes. But what do you think is going to, what do you think? We have these, obviously people are talking about this, and this is a big thing in the LLM space, which for all intents and purposes, LLMs have kind of become synonymous with what we think of as AI nowadays. But it's an unsolved problem. We're writing about it and we know that it exists, but how do we resolve? Or maybe you already asked me that. I don't know. But I want your opinion.
So if I had a second of the day for every opinion I had, I wouldn't know what to do with all that that time. Let's start simple here and think about the allure or the excitement about what we're seeing with the large language models as of this moment, this moment in time, are very creative oriented, very solve this problem, help me do this. The pro con here is it takes a certain amount of intellect to recognize that isn't quite right. So you don't just take the output as is, whether it's visual or written or spoken, and take it as a truth. Kind of take some challenges into your own hands to be editor in chief on this. And I feel, not know, because when I use the third party models for doing something creative, half the time I'm going, I could write that in shorter, I can say it in fewer words, or I can use it in a more authoritative voice. I can give it prompt things to help, but usually I end up editing things and bringing it down. I rarely use something as is, except for humor points.
Right.
So, well, into that, I find it interesting that people are worried about, AI is going to replace all jobs, and I think I'm going to stand by the statement I always say is, AI is not going to replace you, John, but Martin using AI will replace you, John.
Right. Yeah, that's the current feel good response. in 10 years, we might be saying AI will replace you, and then there's nothing after. Instead of what your comment was. But yeah, to your point,
John,
yeah,
did I
the
lose you?
tool is going to get replaced, not people's jobs, but the people that don't use AI to. So augmented, another way, augmented intelligence, another kind of AI, augmented intelligence instead of artificial intelligence. So
I'm.
maybe you're on to something
I think I'm starting to hallucinate in here, John.
there. Do you want to take a break?
Oh my goodness. Well, I don't know. I need to take a break, but I'm feeling that I think we hit a topic that people are emotionally pushed or upset by. Some are excited by it. The commercialization and how you
Hmm.
measure the efficacy of what you're trying to get out of this commercialization, I think are going to be interesting opportunities. So if I take a library of the public information and work on it, does it represent the output? The output represent what is a good output? And
Right.
it may take some judgment at times
Yep.
to, grade the paper. That's an A, that's an A, that's an A, that's an A. Oh, that's a D minus, right? And so that
Yep.
feedback
Yep.
into the machine. But when the content is so wide and varied and accepted as just that's all good content, then you kind of get what you got. So focus the
Yep.
LLM private into a private repository with trusted information. And I think we're in a
Hmm.
different world. I think we're onto something that is what we're going to see in the next evolution of solutions that actually are hitting the market now. And I think I've shared
Hmm.
we've had some side conversations about those too. So this is going to be very interesting. I think the hard part is the measurement and how to
Right.
effectively measure something as being truthful and not a hallucination.
Right. Yeah. There's a couple, and I actually there's probably five or 10 or maybe even more than that. And they all have a large number of algorithm or not acronyms. I meant. There's a lot of benchmark tools out there for LLMs, but they're usually at like how well do they perform, you know, like mathematical reasoning, for example, like feed it a story problem and say, oh, I have 3 apples in one basket and 5 apples in another, and something like that. Can it arrive at the right solution for whatever you ask? So they do have benchmark tools out there, but for what you said, like if something's the truth or not, I don't know. You again, it's like, what do you do? Do you like cross reference it to Wikipedia or something? But when you think about it, Wikipedia was one of the major sources that was used for training these language models. So I think to your point, when these models were trained, they used a type of reinforcement learning with human in the loop. So they did have humans that were in there checking against the model while it was being trained and developed. And this was an iterative process, right? Hence the loop part. And then I guess, and this is my limit of knowledge, is that they arrived at some point where they said, okay, this is good enough for us to push out the door. And I think, to your point about what we're seeing here is that maybe that process needs to continue on in some respects, maybe in someone's own private corpus of documents that are trusted documents within their organization. So it's the model itself. If anything, we think of Chat GPT as an ends, right? But maybe Chat GPT is just what we should think of as a demonstration of the underlying tool, a large language model built on a GPT model. So there you go. So maybe it'll never, it's always an iterative process. This is what we did in machine learning. It's the same thing, right? Models go bad and they have to be retrained. So LLMs aren't any different.
That's awesome, John. I think this was a good little chit chat over the hallucination topic, and we can hit on some other topics around LLMs as we go forward. And um, it's a good time to call this a wrap. And John, as usual, I want to say thank you for contributing to our unriveted mayhem here to talk about hallucinations. And maybe the next time you'll wear a hallucinatory type shirt also.
I might have to buy one first, but I do like it, so I may take you up on that.
All right, John. With that, that's it for the Unriveted crew. Thanks all.
Thank you.